Is God cruel? So for the last couple of weeks, we've been doing this thought experiment on why God sometimes doesn't intervene in people's suffering. But it's been more than a thought experiment because I've asked you to actually go out into the street, find homeless people, and intervene in their suffering. I demonstrated two separate methods. The more common method was to not intervene in a homeless person's suffering. The common idea is that by giving them money, they may just go out and buy some alcohol and perpetuate the problem that they're having. That's the more common response that many of us have when we see homeless people. The less common response is to actually intervene and give them money. And in this thought experiment, I demonstrated that God could bring good out of both methods. By not intervening, the homeless man might reconsider the choices that he made for his life and wake up the next day and turn his life around. Or by intervening, by giving him money, you will alleviate his immediate suffering. So that God is able to actually bring good out of two different methods. I spent more time explaining that argument in the previous video that I'm not going to devote here, so I'm going to put a link up here at the top that you can click on to go check out that whole argument. What I want to talk about today is the response that I got in the comments from some people when they saw those two methods. I was absolutely surprised by some of the comments. Some of the comments interpreted these two methods as God being cruel, as God playing games. One person even described God as being a rapist who is forcing somebody to go through suffering for their own good. I'm not sure I fully got that logic, and if that's how you interpret that circumstance, can you please, in the comments, please elaborate, explain that to me. How do you conclude from those scenarios that God is cruel? Big question mark for me. So I think the logical reasoning that we've been going through has kind of brought us face to face with a wall, like a wall of logic that we can't get past. At this scenario where I view that God is intervening for our good and he's saving us from our suffering, atheists seem to interpret that same action as cruel. I'm not making these examples in a vacuum. Somebody made that comment that I was being insensitive. In the ministry that I do, on more than one occasion, I have engaged and interacted with many homeless people. As a matter of fact, a man who was a father figure to me when I was a teenager, I found out many years later that he was being abusive to his wife, and finally, after years and years and years, she finally got the courage to leave him, and as a result of her leaving him, he ended up living on the street, right down the street from where he lived, where I grew up, where I knew him. And by the time I found out, it was way too late. But the reality is that his life choices put him in that circumstance. He did have the opportunity to change his life. He had the opportunity to change his life before this event. He had the opportunity to change his life after this event. But the reality is that he didn't. And to conclude that God is cruel for punishing him, I'm not getting the logic in that. So I asked Aaron in the comments, I said, Aaron, if I jump out of a window, what kills me? Gravity or God punishing me for jumping out of a window? I don't know if that's the best analogy to make, but in that scenario, she agreed that it would be blunt force trauma that would kill me. So I think this idea that God is cruel is like a wall, like an emotional wall, that until we figure out how to get past this wall, we're probably not going to get much further in this Christian atheist debate, because the same data, we're looking at the same data, and I'm coming out with the conclusion of compassion, and you're coming out with the conclusion of cruelty. When we look at the evidence that there is no God, the classical argument an all-knowing God who's all-powerful, all-wise, and all-good, you can't have evil and have those same attributes of God. So it's a strong argument against the evidence of God. Christians believe that God created the universe, what we call time-space. And in this universe, he created the laws of physics that govern how time and space operates. When he created us to live within the context of the universe. So we are subject to the laws of physics. So if I jump out the window, gravity is going to have an effect on me. I'm not going to fly. Now, he also gave us the power to be able to affect change within the context of the universe. So I could build a bridge, I could write a song. But he also gave us the freedom to decide whether or not we should use that power to affect change, or how we should use that power. Should we use it this way, or should we use it that way? When he created us, he didn't just create us as single individuals living on islands. He put us together here in a community, in a society, in a family. And because of that, some of the freedoms that we have to do this or to do that, those freedoms affect other people. And in that, we find freedoms that can be right or they can be wrong. They can be good or they can be bad. So the argument from evil, that God doesn't exist, it's a very strong argument. I want to devote a whole video to discussing that argument. It is actually very strong. But it's not proof. I just presented a whole nother logical explanation as to why evil exists that makes just as much sense as the argument from evil. So they both can't be true. So one of them is not true. So neither of them at this point are proof. So back to the wall that we can't get through, this cruelty of God. Is God cruel? Because I presented two options of intervention. To not intervene, that God can bring good out of that. That is an okay option. If you don't help the homeless man, his situation might get better, but it might not. The better option is the second option, because if you do intervene, then you know at least his immediate suffering will be taken care of. But there's actually a third, more perfect option. That's the option that God uses. It is what your homework was last week. Your homework was to go and find the same homeless person and to have a conversation with him, to tell him your name, to ask him his name, to have a conversation with him about yourself. And that is to enter into a relationship with him, to bring him into your life, to make him a part of your family. That third option, that's the best option. It's better than the first two. So maybe one or two of the first options actually are cruel options. Maybe your argument for that is completely valid. The third option is God's option, that he intervenes by bringing us into his family. That option it's perfect. It solves the problem. The homeless man, all of his suffering is completely resolved by you bringing him into your family. I don't want to let this video end without addressing the question that Aaron asked in the video about the terminally ill baby, because that doesn't fit the example that I gave of the homeless man who validly made a choice to live in the circumstances that he's living in. So she brought that question up. I think that's where the word cruel started coming into the conversation. So I want to address that. But first I want to say that these exercises that we're doing here on this channel, this isn't happening in a vacuum. I've been doing one sort of family ministry or another for the better part of 10 years. And it just so happens that in the course of that ministry, I have had the opportunity to be involved with families on at least a dozen occasions in which there was a terminally ill child, and not a terminally ill child, a terminally ill newborn baby or about to be born baby. I actually did a video on the first one, baby Andrew, and I'll try to link that at the end or in the comments or something so you can hear that story, because it's an amazing story that I want to share with you. But thank God, the vast majority of those babies, there was something miraculous happened, and those babies survived. But not all of them did. There were some. They were all. Every situation was extremely difficult for everybody involved. And some of them were awful. So at the end of the day, I don't think there's going to be a Christian who is involved in that type of ministry who is going to preach to you that Christianity is a social utopia that is going to solve all of your problems. I do know that there are some fundamentalist groups out there that are preaching what's called the health and wealth gospel. If you follow Jesus, you're going to be rich and you're going to be healthy. That's just, complete abuse of the Bible. But I don't want to try and put a happy face on a bad situation. Those situations were awful. Even the ones where the babies survived, going through the situation was absolutely awful. It was just awful. But to conclude that means that God doesn't exist is almost erroneous, because the reality of this religion is just that this world is completely messed up. And that's the point of the religion. That's the whole point of the religion. This place is messed up. Babies are suffering. We need to be saved from that. And the reality is, this religion actually fixes that. The reality is that we're midstream in that process, and we do see circumstances where miracles happen and babies are saved, but because we're midstream, we see the alternate situation also where babies are not saved, not in the way that we would want them to be. I mean, this literally is the entire purpose of the religion. If this wasn't reality, then we wouldn't need the religion at all. I mean, the whole point of this religion is that this situation that we currently live in here on earth is a pretty messed up situation in which babies are suffering. But the religion is for the purpose of fixing this messed up situation. I mean, this is the icon of our faith, actually suffering. That's the purpose of this religion. So this question of human suffering, especially the innocent baby that's suffering, I want to talk about that more. I think it deserves a better answer than what I've given in this video. I've just kind of brushed the surface. I want to devote a whole video to that topic. So I've got an idea for what I want to do, but I'm giving you homework to prepare for that video. And college students, you're not exempt from this one. This one should be really easy. Your homework is to watch Toy Story for that video. So hopefully, is Toy Story on Netflix or something? Please go watch Toy Story to prepare for that video. So in each of these videos, in the comments, somebody always throws it out there. They say, can you give any evidence that God exists? And I've been apprehensive about engaging those questions and answering those questions up till now, but the answer is yes, I can do that, and I'm going to. But the reason I haven't done that yet is because I really felt like I needed to explain in detail the logic of the system, and that's what these videos have been for the last couple of weeks. I am going to explain the evidence from the Christian system of logic for the existence of God. I've presented this content in other contexts on social media in the past, but without building those prerequisite skills ahead of time, it wasn't received very well. So I don't expect you to accept Christian philosophy or to think the way we think, but what I would ask is that when I present the evidence, I would like for you to see, okay, I could make those connections with that system, even though I don't think in those philosophical terms. I can see how somebody can make those connections. So I just want you to see how the pieces come together when we get to the pieces. So here's a link for the Baby Andrew story. Go check that video out. I will see you over there. Thanks for watching.